Okay, so this is the second of our inhaled nitric oxide roundtable discussions, and last one went really well. I think it was very helpful for people. And sort of the goal here is, we've been doing a ton of training on the iNO itself and sort of how to set up the system, but we wanted to take one last time to sort of get together with everybody and let people answer or ask some questions. And we've got a whole host of our experts with us. So we have Dr. Garfinkel and Dr. Margolis, our medical directors. We have Megan Graham, who is one of the lead respiratory therapists. What's your official title, Megan, there? Is that right?
Clinical coordinator.
Clinical coordinator. Megan has been super helpful and really is the one who has coordinated with us to get this whole program off the ground. So she is a huge expert in this and a resource, continues to be a resource even as we roll this out, but really helpful and can answer a lot of questions. And then we of course have Ben and myself and Sarah Beth online, who has also been very experienced in transporting these patients and has put together our program here at Lifeline. So this will be a good opportunity for people to sort of go through the process and then ask questions. So with that, what we'll start off with is, first of all, thank you to everybody who has made this possible, and thank you to all the staff who have gone through training and then some more training and then a little bit more training, and oh wait, we got to do some more training with you. Thank you. I know it's a lot, and we've rolled out tons of stuff over the last year, so this is one more thing, but this is going to be very beneficial for our patients and really helps relieve some of the stress on Megan's team as well, I think. So with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Garfinkel. Today is going to sort of go over a little bit about sort of the protocol itself, just some high level stuff about the protocol and why and when we would use iNO therapy for these patients.
All right, thanks, Sean. Can I made just a couple slides. Is it okay if I share?
Yep, I'll stop sharing.
All right. All right, let's see. Okay, does that look good?
Yep, got it.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, everybody. Just going to give a little bit of a background about inhaled nitric oxide, why we use it, and just some of the things to look out for from the medical director's standpoint. So there's really two indications. One is pulmonary hypertension. The other is ARDS. And really, in our capacity, I think we're going to be mostly using this for ARDS, specifically likely COVID-induced ARDS. So at baseline, a patient with ARDS, you have alveoli that are ventilated or that are not ventilated, but are being have blood flow past them. And so this blood flow is going to the alveoli, but it's not getting oxygen. So what iNO does is iNO selectively dilates the vessels so that all those well-ventilated alveoli are getting increased oxygen or increased blood flow, which can then pick up oxygen, and it will help with your hypoxia. Now, this is kind of a rescue therapy. It's never been shown to increase mortality or morbidity, but it actually works really well for our function where we're trying to take a very sick patient. We're trying to bring them to a higher level of care, typically downtown Hopkins, for consideration for ECMO or other definitive treatment. So it really works to kind of bridge the patient and increase the patient's oxygen saturations for while we're transporting. So let's move on to the next thing. What do we have to worry about with iNO? Well, there's a few things that you have to be aware of. One is that very rarely it can cause hemodynamic collapse, manifested by hypotension, hypoxia, and tachycardia, but this is very rare. One of the things that's important to know before you put a patient on iNO is what's their left ventricular function, because if you give iNO, you're going to increase the cardiac output to the left side of the heart, which if they have poor LV function could result in decompensated heart failure. So that's a really important thing to know. And if you're calling us to start somebody on iNO, really should try to get to know what their cardiac function is. Secondarily would be methemoglobinemia. This is typically occurs at high levels of nitric oxide. So we're going to start people at 20. This typically occurs at 40 to 80 parts per million. But regardless, it's a very important thing to know about because it can occur within 6 to 8 hours of starting iNO. And somebody that develops methemoglobinemia will develop hypoxemia that's worse. And so we need to know about this because If it does occur, either we have to think about an alternative solution, either reduce the iNO or change modalities entirely, or give an antidote for the methemoglobinemia. And this should be less than 7%. So if you have somebody that's been on iNO prior to your arrival, you need to inquire about their methemoglobinemia level. Next would be cytotoxicity, which occurs by nitric dioxide. So when you have inhaled nitric oxide and it's mixing with oxygen, you develop a byproduct, which is nitric dioxide, nitrogen dioxide. And if you ventilate a patient with this, it's very toxic to alveolar and vascular tissue, and you don't want to be doing this. So what you should do, and this is really only an issue if you're going to be bagging a patient in case of an emergency, is if you have a BVM that's getting a lot of nitric oxide and it's not being purged, the BVM is not being used, you need to purge that BVM before you actually start using it for the patient. And those NO2 levels should be less than about 2 to 3. So that's something that'll be demonstrated on the iNO unit. And I think is Sam going to talk today, Sean? If he is, he's going to give us a good case about rebound pulmonary hypertension in a patient that abruptly stops iNO. Then you will have rebound pulmonary hypertension, which is going to cause hypotension and hypoxia. And that's, of course, fixed by putting the patient back on the iNO. So when are we using this for patients? Well, like I said, it's a rescue therapy. And we're going to talk specifically about ARDS, but really want to do everything else first. So optimize the patient on the ventilator. Do we have the correct tidal volumes? Are we doing our PEEP-best compliance, et cetera, et cetera? Is the patient synchronous with the vents? We want to increase sedation. If we have to, we can paralyze the patient. And then if the patient's capable of being proned, that would be the next step. If, despite all of this, we still cannot maintain good oxygenation, then we'll talk about doing iNO. Now, the nitric oxide is no good if you don't have it with you at the patient's bedside. If it's in the hospital at Hopkins, it's no helpful for you if you're at their hospital. So HopCom has screening criteria so we can know when to bring this. And this is the proning criteria, but this is actually the proning and iNO at this point. So any patient that's been prone or proned in the last 24 hours, the PDF ratio is less than 150, or if the FiO2 is greater than 70% and the PEEP's greater than 10, that should trigger a call to the MDoc by HopCom, and we can make that decision whether we're going to send an extra person to help prone and to help do iNO as well. And we actually had about 10 minutes ago, just got a call about this. So it definitely does work, and HopCom is doing it, which is great because it really gets all of our resources where we need it. So I want to talk very briefly about the protocol real quickly. So let me share that for you guys. 1 second. Let's see. All right. So this is the iNO protocol. Let me go through it real quickly. It's pretty straightforward. The inclusion criteria are people with ARDS, primarily who we're going to be treating, and then acute lung injury, which is going to be another type of ARDS, severe pulmonary hypertension, or PE with RV failure. Again, those are kind of a different group of patient, but we could be treating those, and then those with pulmonary fibrosis. The exclusion criteria are neonates with right to left shunting, but really, I mean, if you're taking care of a neonate, then I think we have other issues. So definitely keep that in consideration. But the relative exclusion would be left ventricular dysfunction, like I said before, because of the increased cardiac output. So the protocol is pretty straightforward. If you have a patient that you think is a candidate and they're currently on iNO, then determine the methemoglobin level and then contact medical command to talk it over, make sure we have a good plan going forward. Now, if you want to initiate iNO therapy, and hopefully we'll already be in the loop because HopCom will have called us, please optimize the patient the way we talked about, doing ventilator management, paralysis, sedation, and proning, and then give us a call and see, hey, is this a patient that's going to be good for iNO? And then we'll talk about the initial starting dose and the other criteria that we need to talk about to make sure that they're a good candidate for iNO. And then the big thing here is going to be making sure that they can continue the iNO at the receiving facility, because it's no good if we start it and then they have to turn it off right away. Now, maybe, Megan, you can talk a little bit later about switching these patients from Velitri to Flolan, or from Velitri or Flolan to iNO, but you should also call medical command for that. And then that's pretty much the protocol. So it's pretty straightforward. Hopefully the MDoc will be in the loop before we get to the point that you're at the bedside, and we can have a good game plan before you even leave the hospital. All right, does anyone have any questions about that? It's kind of a brief overview of iNO.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric.
Good. Okay.
And
Great.
as you notice on the protocol there, and we'll talk about a little bit about this later, but on the protocol is the number for respiratory therapy for the charge RT. So if there are issues that you're online with medical command already, or there's issues with the setup or something like that, they are going to be a resource for us as well. And their number's right there in the protocol. And yeah, so thank you. Megan, did you have anything to add to that? All right, I'm going to share my screen again. So Eric spoke about the dispatch criteria and screening already. That is live. Just also know if you this is a new process, so sometimes things get missed potentially, or things change. But if you get a triage sheet and you notice these factors as well, and medical command has not been called, then you can go ahead and call that at that time too, and start to prepare for taking nitric and proning as a resource. Basically, the way we're kind of looking at this is these things go together. If you have the resources, you have the resources to do anything. So once you get there, don't spend a lot of time trying to sort of figure out what you're going to do when you get there. Just get the resources sort of at the trigger. If it triggers, take the resources, and then you're going to be calling medical director to figure out, are you able to optimize first? Do you need to start nitric? Do you need a prone? Those decisions will be made once you can actually assess the patient, if they're not already on something. And one additional thing to the screening, if they're already on iNO or an inhaled pulmonary vasodilator, that's going to be an automatic trigger as well. So the next thing is, what is the resources? What are the resources that we're going to take? So we're going to take, obviously, the equipment that's up on the helipad. And we're also going to take a prone pack so that we have all the stuff we need to prone. We're going to take a super user with us. So there is an identified list of super users that Ben has done extra training with, and they've been involved in helping teach and do all these things. So they also will be ready to go, and they're going to go with you. That list of super users, Hopcom has it in their area, and we also have it posted on Teams. So that's available. You can know. Many of those super users are also cleared sort of through the FAA. They can go into the aircraft, and they've done some operational training on that as well. So the process will be the same on the flight. They'll take a super user with us. If there's no super user available, then you're going to contact SOC or AOC to figure out how we're going to complete that mission. But we have pretty good coverage. The way we've strategically selected people, and as we had volunteers, we want to make sure that we had good coverage for all shifts. But that's not to say that sometimes those people might be engaged in other missions or something like that. So there may be times when there's not somebody readily available. If that's the case, call the SOC. The super user, we've had a lot of discussion about this. Chad and I have discussed this. Once we start to have all these really complex missions, we're adding on lots of people. We've got the super users, we've got safety officers, we've got people for proning. Well, we can sort of combine those all into one. And the way we're going to work this process is the super user is going to go, and they're basically going to first function as a safety officer. So they're going to potentially help you set up iNO outside the room, but they're going to stay outside the room if possible and sort of function as the clean person, the safety person. And if everything goes well, then that's where they stay. If there ends up being some sort of issue that they need to actually enter the room and help you with, then that's what they're going to do. They're going to enter in and help. So don't not provide help to somebody because you're worried about the safety officer thing. The most important thing is that the crews have the help they need clinically. So if you need to go into the room and you need to help them, gown up and go into the room. If it's something simple that you can fix and then doff and go out and be the clean person, fine. If not, if they need help, stay engaged with patient care and help them with patient care. And then we can meet you with somebody as a clean person, or when you arrive here at Hopkins, that person can doff and be the clean person to lead up to the floor. So that is a new thing we're rolling out. So please let me know if you have any questions or concerns about that. But I think that we have things set up in such a way that we have plenty of resources and we can still make sure everybody is safe. On our ground missions, we also have the EVO that can stay outside the room and also function as either a clean person or a safety officer if they've been trained. So we have lots of resources. We don't want to send too many resources for these and really kind of cause more problems by sending too many people. So that is the decision we made to send those people. If you're going to prone and not do nitric, that person that came along for the nitric can then be your third person for the proning. All right, so a little bit of the process. We'll go over this. You see this picture here. This is the bag that everything is stored in. And I think I forgot to put a picture of it opened up, but this zipper on the front will open up and you'll access the module through that. This is stored up in the helipad bunker where the balloon pump is stored. So it'll be a shared resource for flight and ground resources. And you can see the pictures of what it looks like there. This is going to require a Q shift check, and this will be assigned on the daily staffing sheets of the team that will be responsible. So it's going to be an AM and a PM. We'll try to usually do either the 7 a.m. or the 8 a.m. crews to do this check because the night shift is going to be doing it around that time. So keep it a good 12 hours. The checks have to be done within 12 hours before you start the therapy. So that's why we picked the Q shift portion, so that essentially it'll be always ready to go. You'll go through this whole checklist. It has all the things that you need to select. That's sort of some of the highlights. You're going to make sure all the connections are tight, especially the connections onto the O2 bottle and the iNO bottle, because if they're not tight, it's going to leak, and then you're left with no gas. You're going to do all the pre-use checks that we've been training on, and you're going to check to ensure that you have supplies that you need. And then you're also going to check the tanks. Do the tanks have adequate supply? So the O2 tanks, we really want the O2 tank to be full. In case you do need to bag the patient, you're going to go through a fair amount of oxygen. So that's going to be full. The O2 and the iNO tank, we're going to change if it gets to less than 1,000 PSI. So check on that, see how much iNO we have, and you can check on that. We are keeping extra oxygen bottles and extra iNO bottle up on the helipad. And those are not used for testing necessarily. Those are spare. If you need to switch out, it'll be available. And then here are some of the supplies that you're going to check. So here's how we have them all. These are all going to be inside the bag, but here's how we have them all ready to go. Are you guys able to see my mouse as I'm moving this around on the screen? Okay, good. So here we have, this is the pre-use set. So this is what you're going to use for your pre-use checks. And then we have 2 injector modules. So we have 2 full setups. In case one fails, we have a backup. And you can see they're listed primary and secondary. The primary one is what you're going to be using for your tests. So you want to test the actual module that you're going to be using with the patient. So that's going to be the primary module. So you're going to basically take the module out, you're going to test with it, and then you're going to put the module back in the bag. And the secondary one will stay in the bag and sealed. And then we have this little black bag, which Chad has graciously donated to us, to the cause. I think this was his shower bag. This little bag contains spare parts. So you can't really read it, but it's got a tag here with all the spare parts. It includes enough spare parts to do another pre-use setup. It has spare parts, spare connector parts, and it has a whole setup to, if we were to need to kind of do the coaxial setup, it has all the different adapters that you need for that. So shouldn't need that too much, but it is there if you need it. And then of course we have our ventilator circuit kit, and these are the same kits that we have for our in-house stuff. So this is going to include your dual limb circuits. It's going to include a little piece and adapters and all the things you need to set up for the ventilator. So you're going to have make sure this is on. You take one of these bags with you, and make sure your bag has all these on. The pre-use setup can stay. This can stay in the helipad. It doesn't necessarily need to come with you, but this can stay there with the O2. All right, and then you can see We have an extra E-tank up on the helipad. You're going to go through a fair amount of oxygen doing the tests. So this extra E-tank can be used to do your pre-op checks. And you can see I've got a quick connect on it. There's a quick connect here on this one, and there's a quick connect on the D-tank in the bag. So you can just release the hose and connect into your testing tank for ease of use. And the quick connect is also there. We'll get to that, but if we're flying in the aircraft, we're going to need to take that extra O2 bottle out because there's nowhere to secure it in the aircraft. All right, so the launch process. So if we get a launch, you're going to run the checklist attached to the bag. There's a little pre-launch checklist, and basically you're going to check, make sure the pre-op checks have been done. And if they haven't been done, you'll go through them at that point. And the way you can check this is it'll actually should tell you on the module itself. Turn the module on. You should be able to see when the last pre-check was done, or you can look at the paper chart to see when it's actually been tested and checked off. Make sure your tanks are full and connected. Again, there's a chance that the last person who did the check may not have tightly closed something. There may have been a leak, so double check to make sure all your tanks have the proper amount of gas in them. And then you're gonna make sure you have all your different equipment and supplies. So here's a nice little checklist for you just to go through, make sure you've got everything ready to go. This question came up last time, and sort of like about how long is the iNO going to last and these things like that. They last for quite some time. But if we have a transport time that's greater than 2 hours, that's going to require a lot of planning and thought and forethought. So if you have a call that the actual transport time is 2 hours or more, make sure MDOC and AOC are aware of that, and we can have the planning in place. Obviously, those patients would be preferable to fly those patients to reduce the out-of-hospital time, but sometimes there are certain scenarios where that might be the case, but it's going to be very rare, and we definitely need to be involved in those processes. Once you finish the transport, you bring everything back. You deliver the patient to the ICU. You're going to leave the injector module and the cable with RT. They're going to return it down to their supplies and get it cleaned and all that stuff. And then you're going to decon our bag. You can use the EMIS sprayer to decon all that stuff if you want, or you can wipe it down. And then you're going to fill out this iNO tracking form. And this tracking form is going to be in a clipboard up on the helipad, and this just helps to make sure Megan's team knows where we're using the iNO and making sure everything gets billed properly. So you're going to fill this out. For the tank number, you can actually peel a sticker off the tank itself and place it right on that form so that you know where it is. And then you're going to leave that filled out form in the clipboard on the helipad. If there's any kind of issues, like for some reason we're going to a different hospital or something like that, then you're just gonna have to just again document the times the same, and keep the injector module and keep the cable and put them in a baggie and leave them with me, and I will get them to Megan, and we'll also have to sort of coordinate with sort of the billing and the tanks and things like that. So just let me know if you're doing it, if you're doing one of these calls and it does not end up at Hopkins, it ends up somewhere else. All right, is Sam on? Was he able to get on? I don't see him. So I'll just go over a little case that Sam Matei did. And this just kind of illustrates some of the complexities these calls and the necessity to always be ready. So he took a very sick patient from Holy Cross to Suburban, I believe. And actually the patient had been prone at the previous facility. They actually attempted proning. Patient did not tolerate it. They ended up putting the patient on iNO and transporting to Suburban. The call went well for the iNO. It was effective. They were able to get the SATs up to 95%, and that things were going fairly well. When they arrive at Suburban, they get ready to transfer the patient. They actually, the RT did not realize that somehow the communication did not happen that we were putting the patient on iNO, so the RT had to go and get the iNO set up, which was no big deal. In the meantime, they actually get ready to transfer the patient to the hospital bed, and the thing that we never want to happen, the thing we plan for, and the thing we rarely do, the patient's ventilator, as they moved the patient over, the patient's ventilator got pulled and fell into the ground. Right. When the ventilator fell on the ground, it actually snapped off the circuit on the inspiratory limb and actually left the filter piece inside. So they were unable to reattach the limb. So now at this point, the patient's lost the PEEP that they had. I think they were on like a PEEP of 15 or something like that. They lost the PEEP. They're no longer being ventilated or oxygenated, and they're now not getting the iNO that was being delivered to them. So what do you think happened to this patient? Very rapidly. Very rapid desats, right? They desat it to the 60s and then basically nothing, no sats at all. So at this point, Sam was working to get the bag valve mask set up, but had neglected to actually have that ready to go. So he grabbed the bag from the sending facility, started bagging, had some trouble hooking up to the oxygen also because it wasn't the right quick connect. They use a different quick connect at Suburban than we do in the ambulance. So he had some trouble with that. There were some delays. Eventually got the patient on oxygen, was bagging the patient, was getting the nitric, and stats started to come up and recover. But then they realized that the bag they grabbed didn't have a PEEP valve. So they were never able to get their sats up to the appropriate level until they were able to get the patient back on the ventilator and back on PEEP and oxygen and nitric. So sort of the idea behind this, the reason why this is important to talk about, to learn from this incident and these issues, is we always want to be ready, right? So always make sure that you have your bag valve mask ready to go. This is the practice of RT here, and it should be our practice as well, that anytime you're transporting this patient, get the bag valve mask out, take it out of the bag, hook it up, get your PEEP valve on there, make sure your PEEP set so that you're ready to go. If something happens to the nitric or to the ventilator, that's not the time to be trying to find stuff and set stuff up. So make sure that's all ready to go. And then also realize, as we were teaching these things, what we were teaching the backup module for was we can use the backup module if the iNO fails. That's when we're going to the blender and bagging the patient, right? Well, this illustrates that if you have a ventilator failure, you're also going to need to do that. So just remember that it could be a failure on the iNO side or on the ventilator side, not just one or the other. So always be ready, always have your emergency procedures, always be thinking of worst case scenario. What am I going to do if we have an issue? All right, does anybody, Megan or Eric or Asa, do you guys have anything to add to that little scenario that you were all involved in talking about that?
Nope, I think all the critical points were hit. Again, the main take-home point is have your immediate action drill ready for this kind of stuff. It needs to be thought about ahead of time, Sean said, and it needs to be automatic, because if it isn't, that's when things can start to get out of hand rapidly, because the patient will get quite sick on you quite quickly.
The only thing I had to add from the last one is when you have that bag valve mask set up, hooked to the nitric, make sure you squeeze it a few times to get out the NO2 that's building up in there.
Yep, great reminder, great reminder. Thank you. All right, last thing that I have, and then we'll open up for questions, is what do you do if you need help, or where is there resources? We have a Teams folder that has all the protocols and all the resources, but has pictures and documents and fast facts and all kinds of stuff. That's on Teams and an iNO folder. We're still adding a few things to it. We're working on actually a resource book. So all those things are going to be added. But for now, there's actually a fair amount of stuff in there that can help remind you. It's all stuff that we've educated on, but it's just reminders. Up in the helipad, there's a clipboard. It's got the tracking forms in it that I talked about. It's got an SOG, copy of the SOG, the protocol, and some extra pictures as well. And then you've always got additional help in the form of your MDoc, your SOC or AOC, and then RT. And Megan has been gracious to offer to help anytime she's available as well. So we have lots of support and lots of ways to make sure that these go well. All right, with that, I'll open it up for any questions. All right, so if no one has questions, I have a few that we talked about last time that I thought we'd go over. So one question that came up, Megan, this one will be for you. What is the most common alarms or issues that you've dealt with when you're caring for these patients?
So the biggest alarms you're gonna see on the iNO Max is occlusion alarm. And the quickest fix to that is to replace the disc filter and sample line. Occlusion, obstruction, it almost fixes it immediately. And you guys have those in your extra supplies. So that's the biggest alarm we see. And with these iNO Max machines, especially since they're getting so much use right now. So if you see that, don't panic, just replace the sample line and filter, and it will automatically reset itself and go back to what settings you had before.
Excellent, thank you. Actually, all these questions, I think mostly for you, Megan. Another question that came up that was a good one was there's a question about the filter placement, and can filters be used at the patient side when you're setting up the circuit for these?
So we do not put any filters at the patient, so no filters after the injector module or HMEs, because they build up NO2 and they create a gas. Whatever material is in those filters and HMEs, does not mix with the nitric oxide. So no filter, no HME.
Excellent. And last one I have is you talk about the NO2 buildup in the bag valve mask when you're ventilating and making sure that you squeeze that to exhale any NO2 that's built up. Some of our bag valve masks have a reservoir bag. Does that cause the same issue, or are those okay to use?
Those are okay to use. Any of the bag valve masks are fine. The way that the nitric goes into the bag valve mask is the same. So reservoir or no reservoir, you're still getting the same amount of O2 and iNO.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all the questions that I have. Does anyone else have anyone? And thank you. I see a bunch of people from STAT have jumped on. Anything specific from your guys' side of things with flight or anything like that? And I hope you noticed the color scheme that I use on my PowerPoint here, the black and gold. That's just for you guys.
Strong work.
No.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
Yeah, thanks
Sean.
for
This
inviting
is
us. This
Mary.
is awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, this was
Hey,
really
Mary.
great. Thanks.
Glad you guys could jump on. Thank you guys for your support in all this. All right, well, if that's it, we will close off. Thank you guys for joining in and listening. And we'll if there's any questions additionally, come see me or any of the super users. And Megan's always around, a great resource as well. So thank you all, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Sean.